Doug Edwards, the first marketing guy at Google. So Doug, you came in as the marketing manager, the brand manager in 1999. What happened? What brand did or did you not build?
Well, I started off very quickly down the wrong track because I came in with all my assumptions based on having worked for traditional companies. Oh, I'll write a marketing plan and we'll come up with a logo book that describes how to display our logo and our identity. And that was not at all what Larry and Sergey wanted from their marketing department. So it took me a while to figure out that I needed to contribute to the product itself. The product was going to be the marketing. And so I became the voice of Google. I was the one who wrote all of the copy describing the products that went into the products, into the FAQ, and other elements like the April Fool's joke and the 10 things we found to be true.
Were you writing mainly for consumers or for other businesses?
For consumers initially. We had no business to business at that point. I mean, we were licensing search technology, but it was a very small enterprise.
I remember the first time I ever saw Google, the only thing I can remember about it was how simple it was, that the brand itself was essentially the interface. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And in fact, because of that, because it was so simple and because everybody who came to Google brought what they were looking for with them, it was a very personalized branding experience. Your only interaction with the product was through your search. And so if you found something that was important to you, then the branding that you carried away from that was very personal and relevant to you. So that was, I think, really worked in Google's favor.
Did that make it, in a conceptual sense, in an academic sense, a revolutionary company in terms of its branding strategy or lack of strategy?
Well, we certainly did some things that were unusual. The simplicity of the homepage. And then I tell in the book the story of the homepage doodle, which the logo changes with the little cartoons. And Sergey really wanted to play with the look of the logo on the homepage. Well, it was the only instance of the logo. We didn't advertise. We didn't have billboards anywhere. So the only place you were going to see the Google logo was on the Google homepage. And to me, it was just anathema. You can't change your brand identity. That's the only marker we have that will let people know where they are. And he was pretty insistent that he wanted to put aliens, cartoon aliens, on the homepage. So I kept telling him, no, Sergey, you can't do that. That's wrong. Bad branding. Don't do that. And,
And you'd have these chats while he was in his athletic uniform.
Oh, well, in the hall waiting for lunch. I mean, there were no formal
Was it all pretty
meetings.
friendly? I mean, did anyone ever raise their voice? Was there a lot of politics? Was there a lot of plotting and unpleasantness?
No, certainly not in the first couple of years. It was everybody had their own space.
Because startups can, I've been at a couple of startups which the fact that there's so few people there make them really nasty and unpleasant when you have personalities who don't like one another.
Yeah, everyone seemed to get along. I mean, there were not a lot of kind of off-the-chart emotional, erratic, behaviors.
Do you think that was because Larry and Sergey were such decent guys and because they got on so well themselves? I've often wondered about their personal chemistry, and I think one of the reasons Google's been so successful is because they seem to work so well together.
Well, I think that's true, and I think they hired people in that mold. In fact, Jeff Dean, who I describe at length in the book, is one of the most brilliant engineers at Google. Somebody told me the story of other engineers who would come in who might have a bit of attitude about how smart they were, whatever, and that engineer told me, he said, these people couldn't be assholes because Jeff Dean was smarter than they were. And he was not an asshole. So he set the standard. He was a really nice guy. And so regardless of what you thought and how you behaved, you wouldn't be performing at a higher level than Jeff. And so you couldn't act like some sort of prima donna who was better than he was.
In the 5 or 6 years you were at Google, what was your principal achievement? What are you most proud of in terms of being a brand manager?
Well, I think creating that human interface for the search engine. And, I was channeling Larry and Sergey's voice. It wasn't my original voice, but I did it in a way that I think gave it a very personable edge so that people could relate to Google and saw Google more as a friend than just a utility. And one particular example of that was when we launched the Google Toolbar. And it had the capability, if you enabled the special features, to track where you went across the internet. So we could have buried that disclosure in the EULA, on page 17, you scroll through, you say, I accept, you never read it. But instead, we put up a big red warning at the top of the page that said, read this, it's not the usual yada yada. And it warned people that if they enabled this feature, Google would be able to monitor where they went on the internet. And so I think that really set a tone that Google was on the side of the user, that we wanted you to make informed decisions about your use of our technology and the trade-offs that went with you give up a little privacy, you get something in exchange. So that, I think, gave Google some space for a long time around the privacy issue. Ultimately, of course, that space collapsed. But for a couple of years, people kept talking about that as an example of Google's pro-privacy attitude.
Do you think it was truthful? Do you think Google was a new company in the sense that for the first time the consumer had a friend? Or it was just a clever marketing strategy?
I really believe that people who worked there felt that they were doing something positive for society. I mean,
but I'm asking you, I know they felt that.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at the decisions that we made, and I talk about a lot of them in the book. I mean, every decision we made, we ended up coming down on the side of, protecting user interest. And sometimes the interpretation of what the user interest is might have been skewed from an engineering perspective. They might have viewed something as the user will value the efficiency of this more than they'll care about the loss of privacy. So, for example, importing all of your Gmail contacts into Buzz. Users actually cared more about privacy than about efficiency. From an engineering perspective, efficiency outranked privacy. So I think sometimes they had good intentions, but those intentions were not in alignment with the users of the service.